Hello, hello. Happy Sunday.
Yes. You know what? Here in Canada, I have sun as well, so that's a good
Yay.
day.
I
I just
will say, living in Florida, I grew up in Minnesota, so we had tons of time where there wasn't sun, and you get used to it. And then living here in Florida, if there's like 1 or 2 days in a row without sun, you get really sad. It's very interesting. But I used to be able to go months in Minnesota with no sun.
yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I lived most of my life in Canada, right? So I actually don't know how it feels to be in a place where you have sun all the time, other than when I go on vacation, right?
Right. Well,
But anyway,
maybe.
actually, so what are we talking about today? Let's I'll let you introduce the topic because this is one that is a slight follow up to our conversation for Unleash Yourself episode 100 recording that we did the other day.
Yay! It was so amazing. I got to meet Amy and Joey. Joey and Amy have both been mentors for Constantine, and Amy is a hypnotherapist. Joey is just like a really awesome human being who
Yeah,
coaches, right? Is that what it is?
very much. I mean,
um,
everyone is an awesome human being. There was
yeah,
but yes.
it was an amazing conversation. So make sure to tune in. You said the 20, you say the date.
Yeah.
When is it going live?
20th, so next Saturday, I guess. It is.
Next Saturday.
Yeah.
Excited. Maybe we'll have to like talk about it more on our next live. Okay, so yeah, discipline. It kind of got brought up. Amy had referenced how discipline has been a very important part of her journey, mind discipline. And then we kind of dove deeper and it prickled a little. The word discipline, which I think is so common for many people because it has such this like negative connotation. It first starts out like, at least my first remembrance of discipline was like getting spanked. Like that was the beginning of discipline for me. And then when you get older into adulthood, discipline is really correlated to those things that you feel shame and guilt about. So then you want to build discipline to change it, right? So like diet,
Mm,
those are like the main things that come to mind, is like diet and weight loss, exercise and feeling healthy. Now I think a big movement of discipline with social media, right? Having discipline with social media so that you're not spending time with family or friends and constantly scrolling. So I hear people talk about, let's do a social media discipline challenge, or it's always really, I think, at least at the level of illusion, looked at as like a sacrifice. Usually anything you do after it is something that you're sacrificing in order for something you are seeking. But it's always some sort of change at the level of the illusion. So,
no.
I mean, yeah, when we explain it like that, that's a pretty awful word. That's a word that like has so much weight on it. And I felt that in the conversation. I'm not going to give too much, but I encourage anyone who's listening to watch the episode. It's just a badass episode, but you get to see the shift in one of the people when the words brought up, and it shows us how powerful words are, how many stories some words carry, that we have like this adversarial connection. And it's discipline, of course, makes sense. But what I found, like, discipline can be such a beautiful flashlight. Right now in Lighthouse Mastermind, my mastermind, I facilitate, that's what we're focused on, is discipline. And it's not for the purpose of changing anything at the level of illusion. And essentially, it's really not for the purpose of the act at all, right? Like everybody got to choose something that they do for 5 minutes every day. And I didn't tell them this. They'll know more about it tomorrow. They've been doing it for 2 weeks, and it's been really interesting that they got to choose what it was, right? Everybody got to choose. Like I chose planks. When the body's involved, I tend to have more insight. Um, and the resistance of everyone, they even chose it, Constantine, the resistance that's coming up. And that's what I see discipline as, is a flashlight, an opportunity to see that monkey mind in action, to see the interwoven thoughts that are constantly battling one another within, and really to begin to understand how you rank or judge them, or your ability to kind of just step outside of them and allow yourself to be guided. So that was a really long introduction.
No, I love that. And I mean, there were so many things that came up for me. And I mean, growing up in an environment where discipline was associated with, let's call it corporal punishment in a way, right? As growing up in that environment, going to school and being punished for not being disciplined or being disciplined, really, right? That's, I think, my first foray with the word. And it's interesting you mentioned the power of language. And one of the things I focus a lot on in my life, and as I work with different people, is the power of language and really getting curious to see what stories the language carries for you. Because, like you explained, your take on discipline, mine is similar but yet different. So, for example, we brought up the word diet, right? Some people would look at me and be like, hey, you're not disciplined, you're overweight, right? I've had it come up before. But then you look at it from a perspective of professional growth. Well, then I look like I am disciplined because I'm investing so much, or like in the past, so much time and effort into developing that professional persona. So what I'm trying to say there, Ashi, which is really interesting for me to look at, is the idea that obviously we have our own definitions and we are disciplined. Let's go use the word disciplined for what we truly care about the most. Meaning that for me, I have this sign above here that says follow your heart. What I've come to realize in the last 2 years is that if I follow my heart in whatever it is that I'm doing, then I'm quote unquote disciplined because I'm doing what I love, which means I can be disciplined about it and I can follow through on everything that needs to be done. And in fact, it could be even a step above discipline because you're so passionate, you're so into it. So when you mentioned the people in your mastermind picked a topic and then they struggled with it, I wonder how much it has to do with the stories we have behind it and how much it has to do with how much it aligns with what's in your heart.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of it too, and that's what that monkey mind or whatever you want to call it, like that's what you get to look at, because it's really about what I hear from you, Constantine. The way I would articulate it for me is really allowing myself to be guided by spirit, and to me that's coming from the heart, because like your heart's a part of the body. So to me it's spirit. It's that moment you get to be in flow where time is endless because you're really coming from a place of spirit, so it's in alignment. And through so yeah, that's the ultimate discipline. The ultimate discipline is, it's almost funny, Patrick and I were, because this is one of those conversations that like I'm still fully grappling with how to articulate and how to fully intellectualize in this ego illusion, because it's like outside of the illusion true, like the ability to choose spirit and how discipline allows you to see that. Not even choose, but just allow it to guide you. So when it comes to like, this is interesting, Constantine, because what you brought up is like following your heart.
Yes.
Someone has said to you, you must not be disciplined because of the way you look. Well, my immediate thought is they're coming from the ego. So they're only seeing the ego in you, which is like, how does your body look? Do you have ego level discipline? And I think that's a big focus of the personal development, spirituality, new age movement today. And that's what's holding so many people back, is because what if, Constantine, you already have one of the most important gifts there is, but in the process of what you have surrounded yourself with and the belief system is actually causing you to turn your back to that and pull yourself back into the ego because of the shame and the guilt of the community around. For me, that was a huge case when I was in the new age movement, because I was following my heart like you. And I was like, I want to live a really small but big life. And I was in this mastermind and they challenged me and they said, why can't it be both? Because that's what the new age movement tells you. It's like, you are a little God. You can have it all. You can be like Christ consciousness and have millions of dollars, right? Like that's any business coach is selling you right now. And so My ego, of course, the ego belief system immediately heard that and was like, oh, what? I can have both? And it felt gross and slimy, but it was like, but look at everybody else gets to have both. So I must be thinking something wrong. Well, we know what happened there. My business blew up. It was beautiful. And then it crumbled and everything fell apart because what is built from a place of the ego is built on sand. It will never sustain the test of time because it's not coming from what you say your heart, Constantine, right? So if you are not feeling guided by spirit to begin exercising and eating differently, then it will never last, right? And I'm not saying that spirit is guiding you to eat unhealthily and to, not exercise. That's not what I'm saying, because I know some people will listen to this and be like, well, you're saying, oh, so to be spiritual, be fat, be all this stuff. Interesting comment. But anyway, I should probably close that. So what I'm saying instead is that you still have narratives tied up there, right? That's why you have any freaking focus there at all, Constantine. If someone came to me, I think of some of my mentors I look up to right now. I mean, let's just say like Buddha or even Ram Dass, people that are no longer here. I feel it's easier, you don't want to sit and bring people up today, but they weren't like chiseled gods and goddesses. I mean, they were the furthest from that. Yes, I know we kind of talked about this in our Patreon. I don't know if it was a live one, but our new depiction of Jesus is like this chiseled God who's super handsome on The Chosen. But that doesn't mean that's what Jesus looked like, right? That's what we've created him to be. But it's the weight. It's the weight you place on it. And when you release the weight, it doesn't matter what someone says to you. And their interpretation of discipline to me is discipline at the level of illusion. So I would invite you, Constantine, and anybody else listening, and I wish I would have gotten this invitation, but obviously I had to go through what I went through to be where I am today. But the invitation of screw what everybody else says. Listen to your heart.
Exactly.
Because now, it took years of pain and suffering and separation and recalibration and shedding and just very uncomfortable state of experience for me to get all the way back to, I want to live really small but really big. That's what I always wanted to do. But I allowed myself to latch onto the ego belief system in the moment and start to chase something much larger.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it almost feels like at times you gotta go through it to realize it's not for you, right? And you don't have a choice to decide should you want to go in a different direction. Now, for me, with the invitation you made, I mean, that's the path I've been on for the last few years, right? And it's getting stronger and stronger because, like you said, it connects to spirit, whatever religion one is. You have that connection, and it's tapping into that, and it goes down to your heart level. What it is that you want in this life? What do you prioritize, and why do you prioritize it? Look at the stories. That's what I've done. And when it comes to the weight itself, I've made a lot of progress in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 months, not just in terms of the scale, but also in terms of understanding why things happen the way they do. So why do I get a craving or a desire to go eat out instead of eating clean at home or eating clean out, right? And that's something that allowed me to really understand myself and understand, we can use the word trauma, we can use the word stories, to see what stories have I been telling myself for the last number of decades that have come from my childhood, perhaps, that have come from my early adulthood, that perhaps are not my stories. And a lot of them have to do with what you just said, which is the ego level discipline, ego level illusion, because of what someone may have said and the way my subconscious mind interpreted, or someone may have done, or I may have seen something online. But now I get to unpack all of that, and I couldn't have gotten to the space to be able to unpack until I started asking questions internally. Because in the past, I was seeking answers externally, like the new diet, right? the best in your diet, I should say, the best in your exercise routine, whatever, you fill in the blanks, right? Like you look at other people and hope that you can mimic that, not realizing that it starts with your thoughts and beliefs at the ego level, right? And then you dive into them, and all of a sudden a whole world opens up that you never knew existed. At least that's how my experience has been.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many things that come up for me that I'm just, it's one of those things that's like you do it to not ever do it again, if that makes sense. Like we were talking about the fact that the discipline is really the opportunity to go in and see ego versus spirit, but then ultimately it's like clearing the mind, like the peaceful warrior. It's like you got to clear the mind and then allow yourself to just be led. But if you're not even paying attention to what's going on in the mind, how could you ever clear it? Because it's just like there going about. And I'm not talking about like meditating per se. I'm just talking about the ability to take the observer role, see it, and allow it to move through, and then just allow yourself to be led. But you have to first be able to like be like, oh, okay, this is ego versus this is spirit. And I think that ego-led discipline or ego-led decisions, really the outcome is something that has to do with separation and illusion, versus like spirit-led decisions are truly the oneness and love at the end of the day, the ones that just like fill you up so much. So yeah, I know like when I want to kind of understand where the ego is still kind of impacting, or I'm still trying to create hierarchy and understanding, is like to throw something in that's of discipline. For me, it's the body tends to be the best. Like I said, like a plank or something, because that's when the mind just goes crazy of like 50 million excuses of why not to do it or to avoid it, or, blah, blah, blah. But those are actually flashlights into stories that are still running in there.
Yes, actually, that you brought it up, and I was going to bring it up as well. Actually, let's dive into that, because I'm kind of on the fence in that regard, meaning that, if you look at people that say you gotta be disciplined, you gotta push through. For me, discipline is at times, if it's at the level of the ego, is compromise. In other words, if you don't feel like doing something, discipline tells you, well, you gotta do it because you need to stay disciplined, you need to achieve whatever goal you set for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're listening to our heart, if we're listening to our body, then that means that sometimes, like you said with your plank, if you don't feel like doing it, then don't do it. The question then comes down to, though, is your ego trying to get in the way of you advancing, let's say, or is it really your body communicating with you, your heart, your spirit, whatever you believe in, communicating with you? And having the power to make the discernment, I think, is critical. I'm not saying I figured it out, but I have had examples in my life, more recently than not, of exactly that. If it's like, am I forcing myself to do something because of someone else's story, or am I doing it for me? And that kind of goes back to what you just mentioned about stories, right? And that's why I think discipline falls flat, because if I look at my professional life, where I've been super, super disciplined my entire career, 20 plus years, right? Well, there have been many days where my discipline, quote unquote, took me down paths that didn't necessarily yield the best possible results for me as a human being, right? Because it led to depression, it led to anxiety, it led to burnout, it led to overwhelm, it led to lots of stress. Sure, there were positive things as well, but then what? 2022 is when I was suicidal as a result of the pressure I was putting on myself in certain areas of my life, including the way I looked and everything else, but also the way I spoke, the way my professional life appeared, the way my external life appeared to others, because, quote unquote, I had it made, which meant that the image I was portraying out had to match that in my ego belief. Mm-hmm. So that's why, to me, ego discipline equals compromise in many cases, and fake stories. Really, stories. When I say fake, I'm not. There's someone's story, but they're not yours.
Well, what I hear in that is really like discipline is like the opening to discernment, right? The act of discipline. But you set out when you talk about like your Microsoft discipline, what I hear is that that was a crutch, not a tool. So that discipline was the crutch of, like, you know, getting a higher paying job. Like, there was some sort of outcome you were seeking in the illusion, and dependent on your actions, would that happen or not? Your happiness lied in that, right? When I talk about a crutch or a walking stick, I'm talking about using discipline as the walking stick. So when you are intentionally using it as the walking stick, so like these group of women currently in Lighthouse, we haven't gone super far in discussion because I wanted to see where their mind took it. Did they take it to a place of crutch? Did they take it to a place of a walking stick? And this week we're going to really unpack, like, utilizing it as a walking stick, doing what you said in that moment. If you don't feel guided to do it, you don't do it. But that's where then the grappling comes in and the really paying attention. And to me, it's like, if I'm going to feel shame and guilt for doing this or not doing this, that's a huge red flag.
Sure.
Right? Then I know, like, the ego's like all up in this business. But it's like it's truly part of the classroom, Constantine. It's truly a tool to get to so much deeper, which is to get back to truth. Get back to your truth, because if you can't learn to navigate through the noise, and not necessarily ignore the noise, but to see the noise for what it is, noise, then you'll never get to your truth. And the only way to do that is to bring in discipline, right? The discipline that is occurring is what causes these narratives to come up, and the discipline of taking the time to be the flashlight and to look at it. I mean, I'm really not talking about discipline at the level of illusion strictly, right? Like, I use activities that would be like doing planks every night. Someone could be like, oh, that's an ego level discipline. But the difference is I'm coming from a different place. Like, the other day I forgot, and it was like, oh, I forgot. Like, I guess like, there was no weight on it, period. But like the first day, I was so wrapped up into my body and having issues with being broke out and everything else. Like, I thought about doing it, and then I forgot about it. But really what happened was the ego wanted me focused on this, like, fear and sacrifice and everything else that I was in. So it wanted to just, like, add layers to it, and I allowed it. But I was aware, right? See, that's the difference.
One thing that came up for me, to say two things actually. One is, could it be easy, right? What if this was easy? And that's a question that I ask myself often these days, because a lot of things I've come to realize are actually, in fact, very easy. We just complicate them. They may not be simple in executing, but they're actually easy once you look back and be like, oh wow, it only took this to get the other outcome. And where I'm going with this is that when you talked about a crutch versus a tool, walking stick, right? Why can't it be both? Like, for example, we look at the example of me at Microsoft and before in my professional career. Well, it was both a walking stick and a crutch. But because of me not being clear on my own stories and me not being clear on my own approach to discipline and my own discernment when it comes to, is it one or the other, it was both. At some points it was a crutch, at some points it was a walking stick. So I don't necessarily see it as a black and white thing where it's one or the other. Life shows us, and in your example, right, like it was perhaps a crutch when you forgot about it because of the ego getting in the way, and then a walking stick otherwise. So I don't necessarily agree with that it's either one or the other. Now, is the goal to get to the walking stick?
But it is. Wait, I want to stay there. So it is one or the other. So if we're truly living in the present moment of me, not doing it, it was a crutch. And then later it went back to a...
Why wouldn't it be a walking stick for your other part? Perhaps it wasn't a priority for you that day because, like you said, you had other things going on at the ego level, but also spirit, that you put your focus somewhere else. Why can't it be both? That's what I'm
because there was shame and guilt. So I had the ability to reflect on it. So fear and love cannot coexist. And essentially, if you break down what a walking stick is versus a crutch is something that's coming from a place of fear. A walking stick is something coming from a place of love. Fear and love cannot coexist.
Correct.
Darkness and light cannot coexist. So essentially, a walking stick, it's kind of like when we were talking about multitasking, right? Like we think we can do two things at once, but you really can't. It's like switching. You're like, whatever that's called, switching back and forth. And that's what it would be. So yeah, at points in
I think
your
we're
life,
talking about two different things though, right? I'm talking
what?
about looking at your stories from your past. Because you made a claim that in my stories, with my professional life, it was just a crutch. But I was arguing the fact that it was actually both a crutch and a walking stick at different points. Now, in the present moment, of course, it has to be one or the other because it's just what it is right now. But I'm talking about if you look at your stories, because you go over time in past, it's not just black and white, right? It could be either one or the other, and likely there might be even more in the middle.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was saying how you explained your story of Microsoft. What I was hearing was a crutch, and now you're bringing in like there's walking stick ideas. So yeah, as always.
So let's pause there actually, because I feel this is really important, at least for me. The reason I brought it up like that was to emphasize the point that even though something may look amazing, because it is, right? I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work at Microsoft, for my career, for everything that I do right now, the impact I get to have on people. But even though, or despite that, there was also the crutch aspect to it, right? What I was not clear on my own boundaries, let's say. I wasn't clear on my own stories. I wasn't clear on my own definitions of things. And I allowed it, when I made choices, to take me to a place where it was a crutch as well, right? So that's, when I'm looking at this, is not that, oh, it was just a crutch, because if you look at what I'm in life right now, a lot of it is because of my professional career, right? The fact that we're even able to have this conversation is because I have had a successful career that allowed me to invest time and resources into bringing up a podcast and invest in myself, right, with mentors like yourself and others, and having these conversations. So when I look at it and have a conversation with you right now, right, like in the moment, it's love or fear, and it can alternate fairly quickly in some people if you're not, pretty clear on your stories. But in the past, I mean, that's where our lessons lie, to me at least.
Yeah, and that's the thing where the flashlight comes in. So originally when we were talking about the crutch, it wasn't your entire career at Microsoft. It was the significant discipline that you brought up, that you sought to like perform, be a high performer in Microsoft. So that's where the crutch really had come in. Not your entire career by any means would ever be that. Like, I know too much of that story, but I think that's where the intention comes in, right? So like now your intention switches and you can go back and you can utilize that as the walking stick it is today, because you're intentionally looking at it and unpacking the stories. So now today you're able to see that, oh, this is a walking stick, so I'm using it as that today. But I think like our main topic of discipline, so bringing it back to like what that was like in the moment discipline is what we're really talking about, and how in the moment discipline can either be led from a place of fear or a place of love. And like the place of love, for me at least, is really using discipline as a flashlight to all these interwoven thoughts going on that are attempting to lead your actions, attempting to create shame and guilt out of actions or lack of actions, and then being able to decipher those from your truth.
Yeah.
Now,
for me, to get to the present moment, to be able to truly have the discernment, and again, this is my opinion, I had to look at my past. I had to get curious and ask questions of myself as to why I'm having a story the way it is. Why is this story repeating? And things are still being unpacked as we speak. But that allowed me to be in a present moment where I can be more present and not multitask, where I can be more disciplined about what I do and how I do it. Now, some of it still comes from the level of the ego. So let's say from the crutch point of view, versus the level of the mind or spirit, which is more of the walking stick. And in the moment, it may appear that it's one or the other when it's not. At least for me, I see it, right? Like you look back and say, let's say the plank example you gave, oh, I didn't do the plank. And you could get tricked into believing that it was for your higher good when it wasn't, right? And I've seen that all the time in my life, right? Like I make a decision in the present moment to the best of my ability. Some of it is subconscious, some of it is conscious. And then the power of retrospect allows you to go deeper and say, well, was it really in my best interest? And then go from there.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful because what you're bringing up is like the flashlight that discipline brings, right? So discipline is about like the awareness of those thoughts going on, whether it's in the exact moment or later. And like you said, the discernment, that's kind of what you're learning. Through discipline, you're learning the ability to unpack stories quicker and quicker. And then I think like the holy grail is there is never any stories. You're just guided. Like you're in full trust and full alignment, and like just spirit just guides you where you go. And not like the how some people are like, oh, I did this because spirit guided me, and they use it again, like you said, like a crutch, right? And they're like, yeah, but spirit told me, and it's something that is very visible that spirit did not guide them to do that. This is just like this place of like pure joy and surrender, you know, like Buddha and Mother Teresa, the people that just walked around with this like almost smile and chuckle because it was like they were just floating in a way because you were just so being guided. You didn't have these stories or this weight anymore. I think that's like a big piece too, is like the weight, because, you know, we talked about earlier, like eating healthy or not eating healthy, looking healthy or not looking healthy. I think it goes to your actions. So if your actions feel loving and you don't have shame and guilt, then that's one thing. But if you do have shame and guilt, then that means you're just like on the other side of the pendulum, if that makes sense, right? Like like this person who comes to you and says, you don't have discipline because you don't look a certain way. That's ego weight, right? That's an expectation, that's placing weight, that's judgment. But if you're like on the other side and you're the person that like they said that to, and you're going out and you're eating and you're feeling shame and guilt and you're all that, like you're both just as in a place of ego as the other. So it's just like pointless, right? Like no one's right, no one's wrong. It's just like you're in this state of judgment where there is no love. It's just fear.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a matter of perspective at that point. But what I want to bring it back to for a second, let's take it a little less esoteric in a way. You mentioned actions, right, which lead to outcomes. Now, to me, whenever I look at this, it's like, okay, so what causes me to take an action or not take an action, right? It's a feeling or an emotion associated with my current state. And what I like to look at as well is, okay, so if I'm feeling a certain way, can I just change the way I feel on a whim? And the reality is that based on all the research I've done and everything that we know from life and what I know from my life, it's not really easy to change the way you feel. It's not really easy to change an emotion. So then to me, it's going deeper to the next level. So what causes or what triggers your feelings and emotions? And it's your thoughts and beliefs. And what we know, again, like without going spiritual, what we know is that 95% of your actions, right, are led from the subconscious mind, which means that 95% of your thoughts and beliefs are triggered automatically without you realizing, which then triggers the emotions and feelings, and then triggers the actions, triggers the outcomes. And all of a sudden, you catch yourself 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, wow, what just happened? Right? So to me, the power lies in being able to overcome, let's say, the ego in this example, and say, okay, what are my thoughts and beliefs that are leading me to this path or down this path? And starting to work at the level of thought and belief. And what I've come to realize is that that's where the power lies, because then you're able to ask a lot of questions, get curious, and be able to reframe and rewire how you think or at least what you entertain as a thought or a belief. And it allows you to slightly overcome the challenges of the ego and perhaps come more from the spirit point of view or from heart or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And a great example I can give you, actually, I think I brought this up on the episode that's going to go live next week. Wake up one morning this week, and I was super happy waking up because I had a great night before, great meditation session, lots of downloads, beautiful experience, and I had a great day before as well. And I look at my phone, put it down, go get ready for the morning, look at my phone some more, and I leave the room, 15 minutes later, and I feel down. I feel like, wow, what's going on? And I'm not feeling great. And then I take my dogs for a walk, which is part of my routine. You can call it discipline, right? Because I do take them out for a walk every morning because it's something that makes my heart smile and theirs as well. And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, you know what? What just happened? I mean, I've only been up for 20 minutes. Let's actually dive into what happened. Because the thoughts and beliefs that I had that triggered me to feel less than were automatic. I didn't realize them until I started asking questions. Right? And what happened in a moment? I looked at my phone and I saw a post go live on LinkedIn 45 minutes before I woke up, and there were no impressions on it because somehow LinkedIn didn't promote my message, which meant, no likes, no comments. And in the moment, I thought, nothing of it. I put the phone down, went about my business, but that triggered thoughts and beliefs, right? Old stories, not good enough, not being seen, fear of rejection, fear of failure, all of those things, right? And that triggered emotions and feelings, which created a cycle. And then it didn't get to the action level yet because I caught myself soon enough. And through the work I've done to this point, I managed to mitigate perhaps some of the potential negative actions and outcomes. Because in the past, if that would have happened, I would have maybe taken the action of not taking my dogs for a walk and or laid in bed longer because I didn't feel like getting up.
So essentially, you were able to see how, I think there's so much beauty in that. Like, it impacted you later, right? Like, you were able to go you didn't look at it, so you weren't aware of it yet, right? Am I getting this right? So you got to go for your walk and stuff.
Well, I did it on the walk, right? So I woke up with.
So you were already on it, though.
Yeah, I was on my walk, and I'm like, why am I feeling, down a bit, right? I'm like, what's going on? Like, I know that if I'm feeling a certain way, that means a thought or a belief triggered it. So that's my cue to be like, I'm okay with how I'm feeling, and I'm just gonna go about my day. But we know what happens there, right? Because feelings trigger actions. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, you know what? I know that if I continue this way, my day is not going to be productive or not going to be great. You fill in the blanks, whatever resonates for the person listening. So I said, you know what? Then let me go back in time. Let me look at what thoughts and beliefs triggered this. Because you and I talked about the power of asking questions like why and what and how. And that's what I did. I started asking myself questions like, why am I feeling this way? And then I'm like, well, I only woke up 20 minutes ago, so let's trace back what I did. Oh, I looked at my phone. How is looking at my phone impacting my feelings? Oh, so now I was able to see all the things, and it got down to a story, right? I asked enough questions. It got down to the story or the thought that
triggered it,
right? Or the series of thoughts and beliefs, right? I mentioned I'm not good enough, not being seen, this setting me back because LinkedIn is not pushing my content, you name it. There were a bunch of different things that came up. And then what I did is I asked questions like, is this actually true? And that's when it all fell apart, the negative side, because it wasn't true. Of course it wasn't true. I had so much proof of it not being true. And literally, as soon as I released it, everything was back to normal. My those negative emotions disappeared. I was back to being me. And my day went on to be an amazing day.
I think like there's like some key things that, just come to mind in regards to that like, I don't know. I think one cool thing is like you were doing an act of what you would call discipline or routine. We could even call it routine, right? I think discipline and routine can kind of sometimes cohabitate. So you already knew that gives you joy. So you were able to pinpoint a differentiation because you were doing this thing you love, but you're like, hey, whoa, there's something not equating here. right? And so that was the flashlight. So somehow that discipline or routine that you were doing, that you know how you usually feel, was able to give you a flashlight into something that was like operating in the background. And I think that shows how discipline can be that flashlight. But then I think every time you keep bringing up you unpacking stories and like asking yourself those questions, that can be categorized into discipline as well. You have gotten to a place where you go internal. So to me, that's like, that's not ego level discipline. That's you wanting to heal for the greater, right? So you're making these active
Exactly.
efforts. So I would call that like that, mind discipline. Really, that's the true mind discipline where you're like, oh, this, I know this is a
Yeah.
story, let's unpack it, let's understand it, let's release it. But I think, I could be completely wrong, but that's what I kind of heard, Constantine, is like, how cool, like that is a representation of what routine or a discipline, because you did call your dog walk that it could be considered a discipline, right? That
Easily.
you do every day, that you've already cultivated joy in, right? So it doesn't carry any shame or guilt, it never carries any icky feelings, it's just this beauty, was able to just like be this safe space for you to be like, whoa, 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 there's something lingering here, what is this and where is this coming from? I wonder, wait, I just want to say something. I wonder if, like, because you said, what if you wouldn't have gone for your walk and stuff? I also wonder, like, yeah, what if you would have, like, not been running late, didn't have time to go for your dog walk, and like would have immediately jumped into like a work call that didn't go well? That would have provided like a completely different opportunity for projection, which many people do, but you're disciplined to go internally. But it's a representation then about how a story that was triggered so much earlier is projected out. And when we project it out, it's already run its course and it's just reiterated itself to your subconscious and it's made it stronger. And that's how the cycle, we get trapped. And I guess that brings us back to full circle of how I'm using discipline with the Lighthouse Mastermind, and how I use discipline in my days today is no longer a shame and guilt creating place, but a safe space for whatever's lingering back there to come forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I should add to what you said that it wasn't that the walk triggered me to look inwards. I already felt
No.
and knew I wasn't feeling I was feeling a way that I would create a repeating story with repeating outcomes. So the fact that on my walks I also, let's say, have a discipline of meditation helps a lot. And like you said, right, like I could have skipped my walk, got into a meeting, which then I would have approached it differently because those emotions were running in the background, generating new thoughts and beliefs, and that meant that actions would result. And one action in the case would have been to not take the dogs for a walk, or rather myself for a walk.
Yeah.
And then the vicious cycle starts, and all of a sudden our day is ruined by the time we get to lunchtime, right? And when I say ruined, meaning we're in a state of mind where everything seems to be going against us. And then the day finishes and you get home to your family, and all of a sudden you're snappy, you react a certain way, right? So like like you said, it builds on itself really, really quickly. And being able to have the discipline for yourself, for me, for example, like meditation is another great example, right? Where now meditation has made its way as part of my day, and it's morning and night, and sometimes during the day. But if I skip one, let's say, or if I not necessarily forget, because I don't forget anymore, but if one doesn't make its way in, there's no shame or guilt around it. At the beginning, there was actually a lot, which then perpetuated the idea of like, me not being good enough and all those things that came up.
See? And then you unpacked them, right? So you implemented meditation, which is a beautiful space opening, right? Which it also sounds like your dog walk is a space opening time. And when I say space opening, it's like that pause, the moment for everything to catch up with you. If you're being introspective, right? Like if someone's not, if they're just wanting to project, like a lot of times, I think that's why we have like social media and Netflix and all that, because people don't want those pauses, because it causes you to feel what you felt, right? For those emotions to catch up with you and for you to have to sit with them. And and do something with them. But you wanted to integrate a pause or 2 pauses a day meditation. With the monkey mind, the ego for sure probably doesn't want that because it's opportunity for introspection. Fear doesn't want you to start looking at fear because then you dissipate fear and then fear no longer exists, right? So you said you had resistance, but you were able to utilize that resistance as the flashlight it was, and was like, oh wow, this alone, trying to integrate something great as meditation, has opened these amazing doors that you must have had to work through in order to no longer feel resistance or shame and guilt if you miss one, right?
Absolutely. And actually, that's a great point with the meditation piece. One of the things that I've come to realize with meditation specifically, and again, meditation can be different things for different people. Like I can meditate with my headphones on and a guided meditation. I can meditate with my headphones on and just a beautiful unguided meditation track, which is just beautiful nature sounds. I can do it when I walk my dogs, right? I can do it when I'm on my desk. I'm just taking a quick break, right? So it's whatever works for you, but giving yourself that time to pause and reflect and maybe ask questions. That's what I feel was able to pull me out of many of the situations where before I wouldn't do that. And I caught myself, I mean, even recently, where I would not pause to reflect as things were happening, and then they spiraled really quickly. And the more they spiral, the less likely you are to go in a reflective mode. So what I've come to realize for myself is that I hold the most power at the spirit level when these things don't spiral too much. Because if they do, they might have to run their course, and then I might be able to catch them and jump into it. Same with food, same with many different things, what I'm realizing now. So this discipline you're talking about, if I built a discipline of prayer or meditation or whatever people like to do, then that allows you the power to take control over your thoughts and beliefs and then feelings and emotions, essentially.
Yeah. And something else came to mind for me. Like I work with clients a lot of times to, address relationships that they're unhappy with. And I'm a firm believer in relation with everything because we're separate, right? I'm in relationship with this chapstick. If we really break down what a relationship is at the end, is something outside of you that you utilize and interact with. And alcohol is super common one that people struggle with, especially in the US. I mean, you go to other countries and, drinking just is. It's just a part of life. It was never taboo. It was never, that's why in the US we have DUI rates are through the roof. People are going to treatment left and right because I think there was so much weight placed on it, right? It was all this weight as a society placing on something, and then you, as you build your narratives, place that on it. But one thing in the process of really unpacking that relationship is early on we really make a decision that we're done allowing this to create shame and guilt, right? Say you have a problem with food, a problem with alcohol, a problem with porn, a problem with whatever, but as you've made the decision to heal that relationship, to release the weight, you've got to stop creating more weight, right? So that means you have to understand at the beginning, you're not just going to stop cold turkey. Yes, there's treatment centers and things like that they stop cold turkey. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how I work with my clients. So we're like, okay, we're not stopping cold turkey. So then we make a choice, a decision that you're a competent adult, right? Like, yes or no to drinking. You say at the very beginning, and there's an outcome the next day. You feel like shit. So if you make the decision to drink, make it a conscious one. Before you go grab that wine glass, before you go grab that bag of chips, consciously decide, like, yes, I know tomorrow I may feel this way. I am making the decision. And once you have made that decision, that's it. There's no more room for discussion, period. That means there's no more I should have, I could have, X, Y, and Z. You made a decision. We're moving forward. And at first, it's kind of hard to grapple with that, but it doesn't take long to adapt that mindset. And it will tell you that will set you apart from the masses in healing relationships. And the reason why is because you're no longer adding layers as you're peeling back other layers, right? You're not, the race isn't against the clock anymore. At least we're just like, okay, we've got this foundation of all the shame and guilt they've already built around alcohol or food or porn or shopping. And I know we're not creating more. So that means every time I remove a layer, like we're literally removing a layer. We're not then adding 10 more layers.
Yes.
And like, I mean, one of my clients, I think of, it's just been the most beautiful thing ever, because it's like you talk about, Constantine, and I've talked about, and I think the masses talk about is life happening to you or for you? And then I also say of you, but we'll go with what the masses, you know, like most people talk about. And when you drink or eat and then feel shame and guilt and create it, that is life happening to you, right? For you is you acknowledging, because whether you allow the shame and guilt to be created or you don't, you still made a conscious decision. No one shoved that beer in your face. No one shoved that first cupcake in your mouth. No one turned the porn on. You did. So own it. Who fucking cares? Like, excuse my language, but own it. Right? This is where I am. If you can't learn to love yourself here, you will never love yourself when you weigh 10 pounds. You will never love yourself when you're completely sober. Trust me, I was sober for 9 years and hated myself because it was a cold turkey thing. It was not a progression. It was okay, so you have all this shame and guilt and weight on alcohol here. Well, now you're a bad person and have to go to treatment when you're a teenager. And if you ever drink again, you're a bad person. I had to unweave all of that and get to a place. And now today, you know, Patrick and I haven't drank in a couple of years. And it was never about us excessively drinking. It was one day we woke up and we're like, we just don't, like, why? I don't feel good today. You know, like, what is the point? And so we just haven't. Do we plan to maybe have a glass of wine when we go to Europe one day? Maybe. It's not an all or nothing. It's Patrick and I are grown adults who make conscious decisions, and we will deal with any outcomes. But right now, this is our choice.
Yeah, I love this so much. And I would say
that goes with discipline, right? Like discipline.
The example that came up is with our phones, right? Because that's everyone can relate with that. Because, you know, the need that you feel at times to just pick it up and escape, right? Because if you think about food, if you think about alcohol, all the things you mentioned, those are just ways to escape the way you feel or the way your life is because of your choices. At least that's how I see it. And when you mentioned...
Well, wait, I want to, for a second, can I just like rephrase that? Because escape provides so much shame and guilt. Like just those, like you feel
that's
like
the reality of it, though. Like it will provide shame and guilt because that's the reality for most. If I look at my life, it caused a lot of it. Now, if I look at me going on my phone, it's not escaping; it's a conscious choice, which you talked about. But there is being created for most of us.
But to even look back at that, just to acknowledge that when we grab our phones and stuff, what you're really seeking, because we're in relation with everything, is companionship. You're seeking some sort of comfort because of your uncomfortability. So your phone may be that comfort, alcohol may be that comfort, food may be that comfort. So I just like to rephrase it, because sometimes, like, even thinking about once you've shifted it, it can still like reactivate the shame and guilt. And I just bring it up because I've witnessed it, not that it has to be, but just to bring a different invitation in of like, you're not escaping, you're seeking comfort. You're seeking some sort of fulfillment of comfort within, because you're feeling empty, you're feeling, you know, sad, you're feeling, any of those.
That's what escaping is, though. Escaping means looking to exit whatever current situation I'm in for a different situation. If that's companionship, if that's something else, that's what escaping is, right? I mean, I agree with you that, you know, language is powerful, but the reality is that if we look at what's happening with most of us, we are looking to kind of forget about what's going on here, which is our life, or let's say, you know, our life right now, and then moving on to this stage, right? And then what you said, what I loved so much is that the idea of first removing the guilt and shame and regret around the judgment. And I would say the next layer for me, when I was able to do that for some parts, not all of them, because there's still some I'm unpacking, is now it gives you the opportunity to get curious and ask questions, ask those why, those how, and the what questions, and understand what caused it. Like you said, is it my desire to seek companionship, or my desire to seek comparison with others when I look to social media, right? What is it that triggered that? Because if you can get to the why, to the root cause, that means you can fix it. That means you can gain control back and you can change the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think, I don't know if my video came out this past week. I was going to send that to you, Constantine. But essentially, when I really discovered that I actually had an issue with food, I used to binge eat sweets. And I thought it was because I would limit myself at times, right? So I saw it as like, okay, well, I make a conscious decision. I limit myself. So when I let myself have it, I'm like a little kid, like, oh, and I would eat till I got
I know
sick.
what you mean. Oh,
Yeah. No, I would just keep eating. Like I literally sometimes would go back and forth between salt and sweet so I could eat more sweets. Like it was ridiculous. Um, but then all of a sudden I was doing this really difficult thing. It's called a push. So the business coach I was with is like a week, literally you just live your business. It was awful. It was spirit killing for me. If you know me, it was like literally you're supposed to tell your family I'm going on a work vacation, your friends, lock yourself up for 7 days straight, and all you do is work, and your outcome, the only thing that matters is how much money you made in those 7 days. So that's what I did.
yeah.
But at that point I was eating healthy and I had healthy food in the house. And guess what? I started binge eating carrots and broccoli to the point that I literally was getting sick, physically sick from the carrot. And I was like, oh, wait. I always thought this was just sweets. This is so much different. And what I was seeking, I'm such a person of connection. And at that point, I really hadn't fully cultivated my connection with myself within. And I was living fully in the ego. I was looking at people as numbers. I was like, I have to hit 30,000. Like I was very fear driven. So I was seeking the relation and connection that a spirit connection gave for me, of interacting with people outside from just this deep place of love. And the only thing I felt similar was to feel full. That feeling you get with food, like the chemical release it gives you in your body. That was the closest thing I could find within my house in the midst of it. So granted, it was like an extreme experience of it because I was in extreme conditions. That's usually what causes us to be like, up, back against the wall. This is not a healthy habit. Like we need to get deeper. And so
But
I literally, on my cupboard that had like the common things I would binge other than like vegetables, was like nuts and stuff. So I literally put a Post-it on there that says, are you truly hungry, or are you seeking connection?
yeah.
And I will tell you, 8 times out of 10, in the moment reading that, I would pick up the phone and call someone. I was not hungry anymore. I was truly 8 times out of 10 not hungry.
Love that, Ashley. And here's what I'm hearing there is that whenever, at some point in your life, you made a story or you got a story that said, if I'm not finding connection, I'll find connection with food. So food in this case was the escape, or let's call it
It was my connection, my comfort. It was my comfort when I was alone. I locked myself up for a week.
Well, yeah, no, but that's what I mean. Now, when I look at me and my connection with food, part of it is maybe connection, but I need to reflect back on that more. But I feel like it all goes back to those beliefs and the stories we created based on someone else's stories, likely, or whatever, combination of things. And then, like what you beautifully did, you were able to realize, wait, why is the story there? Like, oh, it's a connection story. So now you're able to get in front of it when it comes up. Like you said, it's 8 out of 10 times. It's not perfect. This is not about perfection. And then when the perfection doesn't happen, because nothing is perfect in this universe, if you look in nature, nothing is perfect, then you also learn to not put shame, guilt, or regret over it. Because I know from first-hand experience that putting the shame and guilt and regret, which I do still to this day in some cases, is just going to make that 8 out of 10 times only happen 6 out of 10 times, and then 4 out of 10 times. And now you're back to where you were, right? You self-sabotage yourself. And that's why the first layer is so critical, to remove any shame, guilt, or regret
Yeah,
from. It's so powerful. And actually, I just realized we're pretty much coming up on the hour here. We
I
could talk
know.
about this on and on, but let's tell people where they can find you so they can hear more of this awesome stuff that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Well, Big Miracle Energy, bigmiracleenergy.com, Big Miracle Energy YouTube. Constantine and I go live, just the two of, well, we might have a guest, but you'll always
Yeah,
see the two of us. Even everybody, please be grateful that we are here. Constantine is not feeling the greatest, but he showed up. We talked about it
I
being
am
less
good.
than an hour, but it's actually going to push over an hour. So we come on live 2 Sundays a month, just the two of us, unless we invite guests at 10:30 Eastern for about an hour and just have conversation. We're open to ideas. And then the other 2 Sundays, the first and third Sunday of the month, the first Sunday of the month, we don't come live, right? No, we're not here at all. But if you'd like to, we do still have a live discussion conversation. It's just in private, and you can join that by signing up for Right Minded Thinker at the Big Miracle Energy Patreon. And then the Patreon group, whoever feels comfortable coming live, shows up the third Sunday, and that is live streamed here as well. And then, if there's a fifth Sunday, well, it's Constantine and I.
Exactly. Beautifully said, Ashley. And most of you that don't know me yet, Unleash Thyself is a podcast. We actually have an episode coming out in 6 days on Saturday where Ashley and I and two other people that are important in my life have a beautiful conversation because it's episode number 100. So I would love to see you there because that's a conversation you don't want to miss. And again, we'll see you next Sunday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lots of engagement today, so thank you. Take care, and then we'll be in touch soon.
Bye.